Hello, welcome to another Nimble video tutorial. What can I say? In only a few hours work, I was able to get a nice prototype for a ReactJS component export plugin for Nimble version 5. And I'm going to let you look at it today. But before we get in that, I want to take some time to do some code analysis and talk about ReactJS as a whole. So I went through the pain of reading the documentation and get a feel for the architecture behind ReactJS, the approach for solving DOM manipulation, and so on. I see some good points about it, a few bad points of the reason why I wouldn't use it. But overall, the digest cycle, it seems like is the area of where I'm going to see a slowdown or a complaint about the performance of ReactJS. There are ways to overcome it, but that would be the point. Also, it's a tree-based hierarchy of parent-child structure within each component, and it doesn't natively come with a good messaging design out of the box. There are some ways to pass props to and from, and you can use Redux, but we're going to solve all those problems today. So let's take a look. We're going to recreate this timer component. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy all this code out of here, and we're gonna take this, just analyze it a little bit. One of the big things, just ReactJS, I think, really pushes the ES6 language, and one of the things that really, makes me laugh about JavaScript developers is their obsession with fat arrow functions and the idea of decreasing the amount of typing that you have to do. This timer component, taken directly from the ReactJS website, shows a standard seconds counting in the DOM. The equivalent to that in pure JS is on the right. And if you're really concerned, I feel like if you're really concerned about the amount of typing you are going to do, saving the fat arrow functions, doing that to save a few bytes here and there, I think it speaks for itself. That being said, let's recreate this thing in Nimble. We'll start with a dialog. This is just a container, and we're going to call it timer. The reason why we're going to call it timer is because that's going to be our container class. Everything I'm showing you just is like represents a visual representation of building the class, and it's going to function as expected. And if I were to actually pursue making the Nimble IDE fully React compatible, basically a lot of these buttons, tabs, and stuff you won't need. It's going to really make a bare bones IDE, turn itself into a bare bones IDE while you build your React component. All of the events will be mapped, could easily be mapped to the keywords for the ReactJS bindings, but that's for a later date. Let's just get this thing working. So just to prove the point. So what we're going to do, we're going to add that label control. And we're going to do something a little more for this component. We're going to add a button control. So let's grab this label, put it on here. Just maybe not that big. We don't have much real estate on their site, so we're going to be conservative. And we're just going to put a button here just because. So this ReactJS has a constructor, which is basically our onload event. The mount is our activate. The will unmount is our query unload. And this is the tick function. So we're going to regenerate that using Nimble events. Double click the load event. We need an activate event, a query unload, and that might be it. So let's say inside the load event, we set the state. Once it is loaded on the activate event, we call to start the timer. But you see this guy, it doesn't have the actual function in it. So what we're going to do is we're going to not do that. We're going to put the function in here. I don't know why they have a function calling a function. That doesn't make any sense. So we will put the state function there. Last but not least, on before unload, they clear the interval, which is equivalent to their dismount. All right, let's save that. Now, the label itself, you notice that the display uses, of course, the ReactJS syntax. So we're just going to copy that into right into the caption of this label control. Oops, sorry. Let's paste that in there. And now we have our label referencing the state, all of the events that the component had, and then we're going to add our own event. We're just going to add one just for the sake of supporting more features. And when we click the button, we're going to say button clicked. And there we are. We have all of the events mapped from that component into Nimble.js events. We're going to save it. Now we have we need to import our plugin. I'll use a different video to walk through the source. This is the ReactJS import plugin that I've written. It's approximately 400 lines of code. It does everything it needs to do to map from Nimble.js and build a React component, but I'll save a different video for going through the code on that. Let's just import it. Import this component. Get a nice plugin installed. And now from this dialog, we have the new ReactJS export menu item. When we click on it, the export has now been, the export is complete, and it should be in our temp folder. So in C temps, we have a React component file. And this is where the beauty is. I've mapped more than necessary for our ReactJS component. I know it's more than this demo or this proof of concept requires, but it was just because I was already in Nimble. I was already gathering up all the data and organizing it. So I just figured I'd finish up more than necessary. This target, we're going to copy this just to make sure that when we render it, it goes to the right place on the DOM. This just renders it to the website. But let's look at the component that I built. You'll see the constructor. I've got way more states. You see my styles. I've got code, events, and the events that we just added. So we should see the button click event in here, and we do. So we'll see our code written for that. As I mentioned, React does not include message handling. I've included a networking type post message design so that every component, as you extend the ReactJS and attach new components and subcomponents, it will make sure it has access to the root to be able to send messages in between components and gather information. That is what the unique identifier stands for. It will establish a unique identifier for each component, and as you push down new components, they attach to the children and share the root message handler through your system of React components. At any time, you can push messages between components and even query what components are on the network. If you make that call, you can get a list of all the unique identifiers of components in your network and who they are. That's all part of the design I added. That was not technically a part of the migration, but it's necessary for any type of framework to be able to send messages to and from. This is the onMessage event that handles incoming messages for your component. You customize that as you see fit. For any messages, I just threw some default ones: enable, hide, show, update, so on and so forth. And then here's the standard features. There's your component will unmount. Looks pretty much the same. Component did mount. This is where we put our set interval command, as well as there's the function to actually update this timer. And the initialize function, this handles any Nimble-based CSS that you want to attach to the component. So as you style the component in Nimble, it will make sure those CSS values are available for your component. And here's the best part, the render. The render builds the div. In this case, was just a single div. You'll see it, the single, normally you would get this single span. It each has an ID, tells you the type. Here's a class for the CSS Nimble sheet. And here's the style reference that is exported at the top here to these styles that you brought into the constructor. And there's your state, or the seconds as it counts. We also added an additional button, and we attached the on-click button to the events here. So let's test it. We'll take all this code, copy it back into the website, and boom, we have a ReactJS timer. We also added an additional button. We click on that button, booyah, we're there. A couple of hours, a little bit of data mapping, some querying, some data processing on getting everything lined up. You even notice that it's formatted pretty decent for a computer-based output, piece of code. Documentation is in there, a little bit of comments in there for stuff I may want to do later. But overall, a solid React component with that will include messaging and also allow a network of components to be attached and talk to one another. That was a lot to talk about so quickly. Nimble version 5.0, ReactJS component export. I hate to be the guy to say I told you so, but thank you for watching.